everybody to another episode of Unfiltered HR. I'm Emily, as usual.
That makes me Jen, as usual.
Jen, where are we today?
We are at Stolot / Krishiki Bakery / Simply Pierogi in Williamsville on Transit Road. So thank you to Anya and Andrew and Cody and a special Pierogi Pete, which I think
Maybe
he may be roaming around. I
appearance.
saw him roaming around earlier, so he may make an appearance later. So thank you so much.
We will see.
Yeah.
The suspense.
The suspense is killing us.
All right, Jen. So we are in a fine establishment that serves fine food and drinks today, and kind of fittingly, let's cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
And actually, we shoot a lot of our videos at great hospitality places, and restaurants are near and dear to my heart. I think they are to yours as well. Typically underserved, underappreciated members of the business community. So today we're bringing an episode just for you guys, which is all about tips. So we're going to cover, we like to break things down as easily as possible. So we're going to cover 5 things that you really need to know about paying tips to employees, and things you probably didn't know. So
Look at all the employees' ears around here are perking up already.
Yeah. We'll talk quietly. But these are things, again, that can result in potential wage and hour violations if employees make claims later, if the DOL comes knocking. So certainly things you need to know. But also things, actually, there's some cool things in this episode that can really save you some money, too.
Save your money now. Now they're trying to scan through. Don't scan through this one, okay? Don't fast forward.
All right,
We'll
Jen.
get into it.
So let's get started.
Right.
All right. So the first thing is just to point out that tips to minimum wage is still a thing. So I think, with minimum wage rising around New York State and whispers that, federally potentially could go to $15 per hour at some point. Just want to point out that if you're in the hospitality industry, and now it's exclusive to the hospitality industry, in New York State, you still can pay a lower minimum wage and take a tip credit for that employee wage. So right now, the minimum wage in New York State for our region in Buffalo is $13.20 per hour. The tip to minimum wage rate is only $8.80, which means you can take up to a $4.40 per hour tip credit for employees' wages that are tipped employees who do tipped work. So what that means, Jen, is you can save some money if you're as an employer and paying those wages. If it's a tip-heavy job where people can make up a lot of that money back in tips, you can take up to $4.40 an hour as a credit with those tips.
Yeah, and I think the term tip credit may confuse some people, but it's really just if it's a server, they're getting paid $8.80
potentially, as little as you can
little
go
as
higher.
$8.80.
You can choose to take less of a credit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the credit would be that they're making that other $4 or whatever that adds up to the minimum wage within their
The tips there.
within their tips area.
Yes.
So and there's ways to track that. So we'll talk about that too. But
And I don't know about you, Jen, but I'm tipping more than ever. I mean, I get that virtual prompt every time I buy a coffee or whatever, and
it's funny when it asks you to tip before, like, while you're ordering.
Yeah, right.
Well, I don't know yet, but yeah, I grew up working in a restaurant and everything, so I'm an over tipper.
Yeah.
So.
Which is good, which
is good,
I
right.
appreciate it. But really, the point I want to make here is minimum wage for our region is still technically supposed to be heading towards $15 an hour. So if you're a business in hospitality right now that's kind of finding it hard to survive paying $13.20 an hour, maybe when things go up again next year, you decide not to increase your base rate and instead start taking a partial tip credit, right? That is an option that you have. So just be aware that you still have that option, and especially with things and inflation and things being a little bit unstable economically, these are all options we want to make sure that you know about.
And this is something, again, we keep talking about math and all of these numbers. This is something you can talk to your payroll company about. Hopefully it's complete payroll at some point. But any payroll company about, to make sure that you talk about your options and having the formula set correctly, so you're not always figuring out the math every night or every week of payroll when you're doing the tips, because that can become very cumbersome.
Yeah.
We as a payroll company are having those formulas set up properly, so that is being tracked and added for you of whether you need the tip credit and whether they made a minimum wage and things like that.
Yeah, your payroll system should certainly be able to calculate each pay period whether or not someone's making enough tips to get up to that minimum wage and doing all that for you. So. All right, so number 1. Number 2, this is a fun one that maybe you don't know about, could save you some money
Saving
here.
money, listen up, ears up.
So when your employees are getting tips paid out through credit card charges, which, again, more than ever, people do not carry cash. They're paying through things electronically and tablets or whatever it might be through credit cards. You as an employer are paying a fee to process those tips or on those tips that then go to your employee, right? So they don't go to you at all. They're going straight to your employees, but you're paying a 3% fee on that. So actually, New York State law says that you are allowed to take that 3% off the top before you distribute those credit card tips to your employees in order to reimburse yourself for those fees. And again, at a time where more tips are being paid than ever, and certainly more are being processed through credit cards than ever, if you took a look and probably looked in the last year so far how much you've paid out in credit card tips, and multiply that by, to calculate what 3% would be, it might be a big number, and you might be surprised by how much processing these tips is costing you. So,
I mean, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars difference.
In terms of the number of credit card tips a year,
Sure.
right? Which 3% could easily be, a $10,000 to $20,000 in savings for your business a year, depending on your volume. So definitely something you want to think about and consider. And it's a very little, increment off the top that you pay back to your employees, and it is just a cost of your business at a time where we know food costs and labor costs and things are all really eating into the very razor-thin margins of restaurants and things as it is. So definitely take a look at that opportunity if you aren't doing that already.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some good news, right?
Some good news.
I like it when I get to deliver good news for a change. Okay, so another thing you need to know about tips, number 3 of number 5, is that none of your managers or supervisors should be sharing in a tip pool. So, Jen, do you know the difference between a tip pool and tip sharing?
I don't.
Okay.
But if you can inform me, I just hear pool and it's warm, and I just think,
It's summertime. Yeah, I
what
wish
is
we
a
were
tip
there
pool
right now.
and tip sharing?
So tip
Sounds
sharing.
the same. So I'm
Tip
interested.
sharing is kind of when employees are agreeing on a voluntary basis to share their tips amongst one another. Maybe they decide together they're going to pool them and then distribute them, or a server shares their tips with a bus person or something
Sure.
like that. Tip pooling is more of an employer mandated and regulated system where a lot of fast casual places will do this, for example, where all the tips for a shift kind of get pooled into the system, and then depending on the number of hours someone worked during that week or that shift, the employer then distributes the tips on a percentage basis to the employees. So the main takeaway here is that managers or supervisors or people that lead employees or have any hiring and firing decisions when it comes to employees should not ever be allowed to share in that tip pool. That's just blatantly not allowed and illegal, especially through New York State. So make sure that that's not happening. Where there are some exceptions, Jen, is if it's like a working supervisor or a key holder, someone that's just responsible for closing or opening at the end of shifts. If they're really primarily helping serve customers and doing some of those duties, they can be included in that, but anyone with really pretty strict manager duties should not be included in that.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So commonly misunderstood, but something you want to make sure is not happening.
Sure.
So number 4 on the topic of pools and tip pools.
Tip pools.
Only the employees who, if you are taking a tip credit, so if you're not paying everybody at least regular minimum wage, which is currently $13.20 per hour, if you're not doing that and you are taking a tip credit, only those employees who are taking the tip credit may be included in the tip pool. So Jen, where this comes into play is if you want to share some of the tips with your back-end employees, like your dishwashers or food prep people who cannot be paid the tipped minimum wage and they're probably being paid regular minimum wage. That's great that you want to share those tips with them, but you can't do that if your front of house people are getting paid tipped minimum wage or taking that tip credit.
You can't split it evenly.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, you see that a lot
Or
at,
in any way.
or right.
Yeah.
It's
They
kind of
can't be
just
taking any portion of that pool at all.
Got it.
So, a lot of restaurants have moved just towards paying all servers and all people at least a minimum wage, and in that case, anyone can be in a tip pool, as long as it's not managers, but back end can be in there, but make sure that you're not sharing it with people that are in the back end if there's a tip credit.
That makes sense. But also can be very confusing.
Yeah.
For business owners.
Absolutely, yeah. And there will be a written piece to follow up with this on my website as well, allyhrpartners.com, so there'll be more details there to explain this.
we're on our last one.
We are. This one is a bit confusing, and I'm just going to touch on it, and then you guys can read about it later. But there has been a new rule instituted by the federal government this year that basically sets new guidelines for when tipped employees may be doing non-tipped work. So things like prepping fruit for the bar, for cocktails, or rolling silverware and folding napkins, all this type of prep work. So if you have employees who do some of that as part of their serving job, whether it's bartending or waiting tables, if they are doing that kind of work for more than 20% of the time in the work week, you cannot pay them a tipped wage at all, and you have to pay them at least minimum wage. Okay. So that's number one. And then number two, an even newer rule as part of that is if an employee at any point is working and doing that prep work for more than 30 minutes at a time, you need to pay them regular minimum wage for that 30-minute or whatever increment it is.
For that specific time?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So again, tipped wages, kind of like our last episode about overtime, not as totally simple and black and white as it seems. Like most things, the landscape is getting even more nuanced and complicated at both the federal and state level. So make sure you check out the written piece, rewatch this video a couple times, and know what the rules are so you guys stay out of trouble.
Yeah, that's good to know because, again, working in a restaurant, that was all included in prep work and closing and doing the tables and doing the ketchup bottles and the salt shakers and all of that. But you have to be conscious of, are they still serving at that time? Are they off?
Keep it to a minimum. Try to make it during their actual service work as well, so it's mixed in. Yeah,
exactly.
And Jen, that's all the tips.
Is that all the tips? We had a lot of tips. If you have any questions, this was a lot. Again, this was a lot. So we have all the information tagged on our site here, and.
Hello, girls.
Oh my God.
Talk about an extra tip. How about some pierogi for you? These guys are working so hard.
These look like, they smell like buffalo wings.
Little chicken wing pierogi, yeah.
Wow. Pierogi Pete, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Pierogi Pete himself.
I'm sure you've seen them.
My favorites.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm going to give these to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Pierogi Pete.
You're very welcome. Can't wait to see you guys again. Bye, everybody. Make sure you adjust those tips.
Thank you so much for watching. That was easy for me to say. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like us to host at your venue, we would love it. We would absolutely love it. So please send us an email at unfilteredhr@completepayroll.com or contact Emily or myself directly, and we'll see you there.
Yeah, let's dig in.
All right,
Cheers.
let's dig. Cheers. Bye, guys.